Next item, please.
Next item is citizen participation. Citizens wishing to address the board on agenda and non-agenda items for action who are signed in by 7:10 p.m. by submitting a blue card to the secretary may speak at this time. The board may not be in a position to respond to non-agenda items. Therefore, speakers should not anticipate an immediate response to their comments or questions. For the benefit of all concerned, do not mention the names of students or school district employees. Please keep your comments as brief as possible. The board president reserves the right to limit times. I do have, I believe, one on agenda item and 3 on non-agenda items. The first one is Ms. Afaf Ahmed from Dearborn would like to speak to us regarding our phone system update.
Good evening. My name is Afaf Ahmad.
Good evening.
Good evening.
I just heard the gentleman earlier when he was talking about the phone system, and he mentioned that when the phone call takes place, the cops know where it's coming from and the location. And the time limit is from September to December to have the project done. My question is, what's the alternative? If the system was down and there's no access to the phone, lines cut off, anything can happen. What's the alternative? What about if there's a delay in the project? It was not done on time. I have a suggestion, since my background is design, art, and media. Why don't we create an app? This app can be, we can have both, phone and app. The app can be created where it can be downloaded, student, faculty, and teachers. It can help to report incident, suspicious activity, or anything. So, and it's connected with the all schools, districts, and the cops. And this way, if let's say an incident happened in Fortson, they know everywhere that this happened in that school, be cautious. So we need, somebody might say, well, what about if the students, they abuse it? Well, there's a disclaimer, terms and condition. They have to accept. If they try to abuse it, fraud claims, they get punished. So we need to think about an alternative, not only phone lines, because now everything is on computers, on phones. If kids doesn't have an access to the phones, we have faculty, we have teachers, so we need to find alternative, not only the phones. Thank you very much.
Thank you for your suggestions.
Under non-agenda items, we have Mr. Ahmed Sharara, representing Detroit Furniture and a former teacher, would like to speak to us regarding a new scholarship and resignation.
Dr. Maleko, board members, and all in attendance, good evening. My name is Ahmed Sharara, and I have educated students at Laurie School for the past 3 years. All praise be to God who has allowed me the opportunity to serve the future generations of our community. The last 3 years at Laurie have been some of the best years of my life. I have learned so much from my students, fellow educators, and administrators. I am grateful for the opportunities that have been given. During these last 3 years, I have been involved in facilitating learning to our students, coached different sports, led different school initiatives, helped keep our school blog updated, and was part of something great at Laurie School. Most importantly, I've been able to mentor, build memorable relationships and friendships with our students. I am blessed to have had this opportunity to create everlasting bonds with amazing people. As you may or may not know, my family and I own and run a furniture business called Detroit Furniture. Recently, we have had growth in the business, and my family and I have been working very hard to keep up. My father, who has given me so much, has decided that he would like my brothers and I to become partners and expand our role in our business. Due to the bigger role I will be playing as a partner, I will no longer be able to teach starting the 2018-2019 school year. Over the past few years, I've learned so much under the guidance and leadership of many great administrators. Some not limited to Mr. Mike Asali, Mr. Osama Beydoun, Mrs. Zahra Zariq, Mrs. Mirvat Saiba, and my all-time favorite, Mrs. Rima Yunus. All of these individuals are true leaders who I benefited from greatly, and I'm forever thankful to them for their dedication and commitment to our students and staff at Dearborn Public Schools. I've also been influenced greatly by many staff members in Dearborn Public Schools, which includes my sister, Naveen Bazzi, who is a teacher at Bryant and one of my role models. She was one of the first people to inspire me to enter the field of education. I would also like to recognize my mentor teacher, Mrs. Fadwa Fawaz, who helped me until the last day. And finally, my partner and my right-hand man, the most dedicated teacher and mentor I've ever met, my brother, Mr. Ali Salami, coach and teacher at Laurie School. The list will go on forever if I wanted to mention all the amazing teachers and staff members that I have made cherished connections with. I aspire to follow in the footsteps of all of these great teachers, support staff, and leaders that I've gained so much insight from. I hope to continue to be a role model and advocate for our teachers, students, and district. With that being said, today I would officially like to announce the Detroit Furniture Future Educator Scholarship, a $500 scholarship awarded to 2 students who attended Laurie School, graduated from Fortson High School, and commit to go in the field of education. My siblings and I all attended Laurie School, graduated from Fortson, and are certified educators. Every year we will dedicate this scholarship to a champion of education. This year, we have decided to dedicate this scholarship to my former high school principal, an exemplary figure who greatly influenced my educational journey, the late Mr. Imad Fadlallah. Mr. Fadlallah's notable career remained a driving force that helped me complete my master's degree in educational leadership, which I earned this past May. To conclude, one of my favorite college professors, someone you may know, Dr. Yusuf Musalam, explained to graduate students in our Intro to Educational Leadership course that the interaction and encounters you have during life and in your career will last with you forever and follow you throughout your life, so make sure they are all positive. Today, with a clear conscience, I can say I have taken that advice, and all of my interactions and encounters have been positively impactful. Thank you for everything, and forever and always, students first. Thank you.
Trustee Hammoud.
I'm sorry, if I may, this is just a comment as to Mr. Sharara. First of all, his family is here today, and it is no surprise that he's come forward, and you can see how much giving and how much passion he has, and I think that really stems from his family. So, and his sister Naveen, who we talked about, who's also an educator here with us, she's here today. So I want to thank you, thank the family for everything, and all the sacrifices you've made. And hopefully to you, we're not giving up on you just yet. So do what you have to do and come back. But this is why I love this district. It is, I remember Naveen, I remember her brother, I remember them at Laurie and at Forts, and now they're investing here in our district, they're investing here in our community, and they're giving back to our schools. And this is why this district is home. And their parents are here, and that you see the support system, and this is why I love these schools and their friends and so on. So thank you for everything.
Trustee Lane.
You mentioned the name of Mr. Fadlallah, and I want to thank you for remembering this, because I feel this is unfinished business for me as a person. Mr. Fadlallah's passing was a shock to so many of us, and I don't think we've remembered him as much as we should. I mean, the individuals he touched, like yourself, remember him always. I remember him. And we planted a small cedar of Lebanon over at Stout School, but really the team meeting room at Stout should have been named after Imad Fadlallah. There are so many things that he advocated for that I wish we could have done more, and I consider it's unfinished business. I suggested some things. We haven't gotten those things done. I know I was conversing with other people about what should be done, part of the reason was, you know, I didn't know what his family wanted done or didn't done. I'm very happy to have you do this because it's very well deserved that Imad Fadlallah have something named after him. I miss him very much, and he benefited many, many people here, so thank you.
And will leave a lifelong of legacies just like this, including myself. And I do agree with you. I don't think the work is done.
Yeah.
And yet I still think that the work would never be done based on the countless amounts of students I think that he has touched. So, and many others in this district, many other administrators and teachers in this district.
Trustee Barry?
Trustee Lane called it unfinished business. Why don't we get to it? I mean, a while back, I heard there was a committee, had discussions, then it kind of went away. I don't know why, you know, this thing called politics always kind of gets in the way, but if we really, I mean, a couple months ago, it's probably about 3 months ago, said we should do something for the late Brian Whiston before he passed away. So we shouldn't just sit here and just talk about things. We should put them to action. I know there was a couple great events recognizing the late Brian Whiston, God bless his soul, and with what Mr. Fadlallah did for this district, among others, but what he did too. I mean, I talked to hundreds of graduates of his, and just stories just don't stop. So I think
Perhaps we could ask the superintendent to take a look at this and make some recommendations.
sure it would be
If you
great.
don't mind, from your cabinet. Okay? Trustee
I
Hummel?
do have to touch on something Trustee Barry said that really hits home, is that why do we have to wait till someone passes to honor them? And in fact, it was Mr. Imad Fadlallah that had called one day, and he said, why are we going to wait until somebody like Dr. Brim eventually passes away
Thank you
until
for
we honor
remembering
them?
that. Yeah.
And I'll never forget that phone call. And obviously, he believed that Dr. Brem deserved a lot more than the hallway named after him, right? But he really wanted people to be honored and wanted them to be touched by other people honoring them while they are living. And I think that that is very important, and I think that as we move forward, we keep that in mind, because that is what he advocated for.
And we should do that daily amongst ourselves, too. I mean, we need to tell people when they've moved us and touched us, so, yeah, no, agreed. Thank you.
Next card I have is the privatization of school lunches in Dearborn. Ms. Adele Hawkins from Dearborn would like to speak to us.
Thanks for letting me speak. I'm a lifelong Dearborn resident. I spent my whole life in Dearborn schools. I appreciate the concerns with making more healthy choices available. However, I just want to press on a concern of you potentially going with Chartwell's, a major corporation that's been known to pass off non-halal meat as halal. There was a big incident at University of Regina in Canada that was reported on by the CBC this year, February 19, 2018. You did mention wanting to make sure more halal options were available to students. So me and some other residents are concerned with you going with a corporation that's been known to violate people's trust in this matter.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Can I just make one comment on to
Certainly.
just, the companies haven't been, this, again, we're in the process, but one of the things that is clear in the RFP is those halal options are just a must, and it's something that's critically important, and in fact, I mentioned about how we will enhance that. So whichever company is selected, halal options are a #1 priority.
Thank you. Next.
Our third and last blue card is Ms. Laurel Robinson of Dearborn would like to speak to us regarding type 1 diabetes awareness, anxiety, depression, boundary exemption, and 504 rights.
Good evening, and thank you. I'd like to ask the room, who here knows what it's like to suffer from anxiety and depression? Raise your hand, okay. Who here really knows a teenager with uncontrolled type 1 diabetes, right? Who here has witnessed a blood sugar reading of 12 with the person seconds from death. Okay, that being said, in the United States, population of 320 million, there are only 1.25 million type 1 diabetics. Roughly 200,000 of those are children. That's a frequency rate of around 4 type 1s per 1,000 kids. People with type 1 diabetes are almost twice as likely to develop major depressive disorder. They also have a higher risk of suicide than the general population. And there is the risk that they carry large amounts of a drug on their person that can kill them 24/7. Why am I asking you all of these questions and telling you these facts? I am here tonight to advocate for my daughter, Isabel, who is a type 1 diabetic and suffers from anxiety and clinical depression. She has a history of self-harm and thoughts of killing herself, but she had conquered those, I thought. Since March, I have tried to work collaboratively with the district to decide Isabel's admission into Dearborn High and to get a 504 plan. I have been around in circles with the boundary exemption process and district employees about the importance of considering Isabel's psychological state, proximity to EMS, and after-school care in her initial placement within the Dearborn Public Schools. I took 2 letters of medical necessity of placement into Dearborn High for her social and emotional needs to the appeal hearing. Once my appeal was denied, I started researching Isabel's 504 rights, as I could not believe that the administration would purposely ignore the advice of the medical professionals in charge of Isabel's care and exhibit such callous disregard for a life-threatening disability. In a severe low blood sugar reaction, every second can count. A school administrator saying that in their 5 years they have never had a diabetic emergency in the schools is akin to saying we've never had a school shooting. Everyone's diabetes is different, and Isabel's is particularly difficult. I wrote a well-researched and documented letter to the superintendent trying to resolve this, stating how I felt Isabel's rights had been violated. The response I received from the executive director of staff and students was ignorant and insulting. At that point, out of desperation for the health and safety of my daughter, I filed a complaint with the U.S. Department of Education Office of Civil Rights, and I have since retained a special education lawyer. Isabel does not know anyone going into Edsel Ford High School. She knows 3 or 4 kids going into Dearborn High, kids who know her and are comfortable with her diabetes. Her best friend, who is enrolled in Dearborn High, knows Belle's sugars and moods better than I do and can smell the changes in her blood chemistry. How can Edsel Ford provide that? It is vitally important that she has touchstone friends who know her and are not freaked out by her diabetes. Have you ever seen the reaction of some people when blood sugar is checked? Let alone when you are out of your mind from a high or a low blood sugar? Since we received that rebuttal email, the stress it has caused Isabel has made her sugars even more difficult to control. Her insulin usage has increased by 20 units a day, a 20% increase. We have also had to increase her anxiety and depression medication by 25%. She is thinking of cutting and killing herself again, undoing years of work in therapy. Not all children are resilient and adjust well. Ladies and gentlemen, Dearborn Public Schools are injuring my child mentally and physically as we speak, and they are endangering her life with their uninformed, ignorant decisions. I have tried to work with the district, and this is my very last attempt. My child's life is threatened, and I will do what I must. Please put my student first and put her into Dearborn High School. Thank you.
Thank you. Next item, please.
Next item is approval of minutes. Approval of minutes of the following Dearborn Board of Education meeting. Special meeting, closed negotiations, July 23rd, 2018. Board report 18-10. Special meeting, closed expulsion, July 23rd, 2018. Board report 18-11. Regular P through 12 meeting, July 23rd, 2018. Board report 18-12. Recommended action, make any necessary corrections and move approval of these minutes.
So moved.
Support.
Is there any discussion? All those in favor of this motion indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? It's unanimous. Next item, please.
Item number 6, special reports.
We have Dr. Patterson, who's going to come up on NWEA data. He-
NWEA, Dr.
Yeah.
Glenn Maleko.
Good evening, Board President Mead, Dr. Maleko, and Board Trustees. Tonight I'll give a brief update of our most recent NWEA outcomes from the 2017-18 school year. As all of you know, NWEA is an assessment that we offer 3 times a year in grades K through 8. It's something that we use to measure student progress towards long-term learning objectives, and we use it to communicate student achievement to parents, as well as our teachers use it to make instructional decisions on a child-by-child basis. So what I'd like to do tonight is I'll just offer a brief review of the test and then show you our most recent NWEA outcomes. So NWEA is an assessment that we use to measure student growth. And this is something different than just student achievement, which is just looking at how they're doing at one point in time. If we're looking at something like a very basic skill like multiplication or a spelling test, measuring growth is pretty simple because we can just give a small assessment on a weekly basis, and if we see improvement on that, we hope that that's a sign of student learning. But when we try to do that over bigger pieces of learning, such as units, semesters, or even years, that's a little harder to do. And our local assessments that we write for classroom bases just really don't do that. To do that, we need something with more items, a longer length, a wider range and variety, and we use the NWEA assessment to do that for us. This is an assessment that is built to show a student's growth over time within the year and also over several years. The test is a computer adaptive test, and this is something that's a lot more common currently. Many of the assessments that we give, like MSTEP and WEA, are also computer adaptive. The benefit of that is we get much more accurate student information with a smaller number of items and a shorter testing length. What's surprising to a lot of people is with computer adaptive assessments, they're all designed to where the student's actually going to get about half of the items on the test incorrect. And when you think about our traditional testing, typically when we miss half the questions, that's 50% is roughly an E. But these tests are designed to where when a student begins the test, they kind of give them a wide variety of items, and then as the student gets them correct and incorrect, it will fine-tune on where that ability is. And they can do that much faster than just a test that's built with like one specific form for all students. So typically the NWEA assessment can do this in about 50 questions with about an hour of testing. And we administer this fall, winter, and spring. So I'm just going to show you a few graphs just to put the context of what our local data looks like. When we take a look at a student's growth over time, this is a picture of how that looks from kindergarten through 8th grade, the grades that we administer it. And what you'll see is that in the early grades, students score much higher on the test in a short amount of time. So it shows a lot of growth in the early grades, and then that starts to plateau as they get into the higher grades. This is pretty typical of growth assessments. I added a couple of the lines here just because this black line shows the average growth that a student would have from kindergarten through 8th grade. Looking at 5th, 6th, 7th, and 8th grade, the colored lines above that show a study that NWEA did that students that went on later to score well on the ACT did a little bit above just the average score on the test. So while the 50th percentile says what is average across all students taking NWEA, being prepared for college and career readiness is usually more like in the 60th to 70th percentile. And that's something that we take into account when we're interpreting these scores with students and parents as well. So this is a report that teachers can see for all of their students. And what this is showing is actually growth we would hope to see in all of our students. This is a student's scores from 1st grade. Those are the ones on the far left all the way up through 3rd grade. And as you can see, the first score was at a 141, and that red means that they were in the lower level of students of their peer group. And over the course of 3 years, we can see that students' achievement trending over time until now they're in the top 20% of their peer group. And this allows us not just to take a look at that single snapshot of where they are in the year, but is the student making the progress that we want? Because we do know that we have students that come in that might have some deficits that can't just be filled within a short period of time, but something that takes some concerted effort over quite a few semesters and years.
So this result is for each student
Yes.
individually?
Yes, so a teacher can pull this up and see each student relatively quickly and kind of gauge where they are. And this is something we have all of our teachers do when students come into the classroom at the beginning of the year, just to kind of understand where they are academically.
So this gives teachers the opportunity to discuss this with parents, the teacher-parent meeting.
Yes, yes, exactly. And this next,
Is the one that you're showing there, is that a hypothetical or an actual student?
no,
in
this
our
is
district?
one of our
One
students.
of our students?
Yes,
Yeah,
yes.
this is great.
Yes. And this next report that I have, this is what many of our schools use during parent-teacher conferences. What this shows is the student's score. It shows the district's average score. NWEA assesses students across the nation, and so it shows how it relates to that peer group. And then it also makes a projection for how that student will most likely do in the future. And this is something that when parents come in, teachers will share it with them and have discussions around how that student is doing academically. In terms of our district outcomes, we've been giving NWEA for 4 years now, and we've consistently shown above average growth compared to what NWEA sees across all of its clients across the nation. So that's the same this year. And we also see the growth that we have in some of our subgroups to be even greater than our typical growth, which shows that some of those achievement gaps are closing within the school year. Okay, so I have the 4 subjects that we assess in NWEA. I'd like to just take a moment and look at these results. So what you're seeing on this graph is on the left-hand side, those numbers represent the fall to spring growth. So typically we assess in September and in May of students in each of the grades along the bottom, kindergarten through 8th grade. So you can see that there's more growth in kindergarten than we show in 8th grade, similar to the other graph that we had. The orange squares that you see that are running along the bottom, that is the typical growth that NWEA sees across all of its clients. And the green circles that are above all of those orange squares are our district's growth. So you can see across the board that the growth that our students see between fall and May is typically higher than the average growth that's seen in NWEA client districts. The light green circles that I included in there were the last few years' scores as well, just to show you that this is something that we've consistently seen. I'd also like to point out in kindergarten that the growth this year was even higher than we've seen in the past few years. I think that's a credit to some of the work that we've been doing with our Reading by Third initiatives. And as we go across the other subjects, I think you'll find that that trend is pretty similar across all of the boards. So for math, we see a similar trend where our district growth is above the national average. We assess language only beginning in 3rd grade, but in 3rd through 8th grade, we'll see that that trend continues. In science, we see the same type of trend as well. And then I would also like to point out this last graph shows our English-only speaking students compared to our English learners. The English learners are the purple dots, which you can see are for the most part above the blue dots. And what that's showing is that our English learners, while our district is increasing good as a whole, our English learners are making even slightly more gains, which is something that we are hoping, to see. And we've seen that pattern the last several years. So overall, the district outcomes are very positive in terms of our student growth from fall to spring with NWEA. So I'd like to turn it over to see if any of you had any remarks or questions.
Well, I would like to ask, is this test going to continue?
Yes, yes. So when...
I mean, from year to year to year, so
yes.
that you can continue to compare.
Yes, and it will. So one of the reasons that the district went to NWEA a few years ago was Well, one was to eliminate some of the district assessments we have and to try to get a little more streamlined system. The other one was our state has gone through several changes in our state assessment system, and when we switch out a test, it makes it hard to kind of see that growth in how our program is doing. So this was one of those measures that we wanted to have consistent. And Brian Whiston was a firm proponent of NWEA, and because of his work, the state has actually been supporting using assessments like this to help support student learning, and so they're going to partially compensate districts for using these types of measures. So this is something that we are planning on using for a while, just because it is a consistent measure, and we use it to look not just at individual student growth, but also to look at our programs as a whole and make sure what we're doing is working.
Trustee Thorpe?
I would assume with the information that we're collecting from the NWEA, we're able to start to quantify summer learning loss. And I know for both of my kids, it seemed like they had more work that they were asked to do over the summer. I'm assuming that we're connecting those dots and trying to make sure that that fall NWEA is not going to be lower than what they had in the spring.
Yes, and that is something that we have begun looking at. So one of the ways that we've been quantifying the summer learning losses, the data that I'm showing you is student gains from fall to spring. We can also take a look at what happens from spring to fall as they switch grades. And we will be taking a look once this fall administration is over. We'll be taking a look at our summer programs and taking a look at that summer learning loss. It's typically something we see at the national level. Going back to that line graph that I showed you, typically the fall RIT score, which is NWEA's unit, is typically a little smaller than the spring RIT score of the year before because of that summer learning loss. And as we know, in districts with high levels of poverty, we typically see that a little more pronounced. So we will be evaluating that, and we also take a look at our summer programs to see how well it's impacted that as well.
Great. Trustee Pelicott?
Okay, I got a couple different questions. So I'll start with the first one, which we typically hear from the parents about testing time. If they're taking, if these are about 60 minutes each, and you've got several different subject matters, and we're doing it 3 times a year, do they do it all in one day? Do they do it spread out over 1 week, where they do math on one day and science on another and English on another? How are those tests delivered?
It is typically spread out. We don't encourage students to test for long periods of time, especially at the early elementary grades. One thing that we will be doing this fall is to try to make that testing situation a little more consistent across the district. For the most part, we've left it up to schools to kind of manage in terms of how they schedule those. They don't schedule all of the assessments on a day, especially in elementary. Typically, students will do one subject at a time, and they're not time tests. Typically, it's around an hour or so. If students need to come back the following day, they can pause that session and then come back and complete it on the following day and not have to lose any work. So typically, if it seems like students aren't finishing in that particular day, they can take a pause, get rested, come back and finish it up the next day, because we don't want to encourage a lot of testing. And this is really in elementary, aside from some of our reading by third measures. We tried to reduce some of those district required testing because we wanted to make sure that teachers had the flexibility to, assess on their own time as well. But one of the benefits of this assessment is that it is a very valid and reliable measure, and it does allow us that comparability across schools. So those are...
That comes to my next question. I'm not sure who's developed the test, but since it's a nationwide test, curriculum in every state is a little bit different. Who's vetting the content of these tests to make sure that it aligns with what's actually being taught in the classroom at any given stage, since they're doing a nationwide test that's, I'm assuming, kind of generic?
So for the most part, that's left up to the test vendors, and there are several different companies that make assessments similar to this. Because there's still a majority of states that are using the Common Core, we're using a Common Core aligned version of NWEA. So it it assesses a grade span of grades like 2 through 5. So they've taken the framework of the Common Core and written their items to match that Common Core framework. They also vet the items on a regular basis. So when a student takes an assessment, they will put in some items that don't affect the student's score to get some data on those assessments to see if they perform well, and items that don't work well in the test are removed. So they try to go through a vetting process to make sure that it's a high-quality test. They do release their technical guides to make sure that they're being kind of open and transparent about their processes, but for the most part, we do need to leave that up to the test vendor to make sure that they're doing their part for that.
So then with that being said, can teachers, I mean, I know with the MEPs and all that kind of stuff, everything was secret and you couldn't look at what was on there and that kind of stuff because you could potentially contaminate the results. Right. Do the teachers actually get to see what's being tested and can they weigh in and say, hey, look, this doesn't have, you know, this test is not working or is not a valid, reliable source?
So in terms of looking at the items, that is one downside of using assessments like this. The teacher will not be able to see the items that the student saw, and that's challenging with computer-based assessments because they draw from a large bank, so each student in the classroom is essentially seeing a different test.
Right.
So while we do gain that comparability and we gain kind of the valid and reliability that we get from something that's gone through some psychometric testing, and we get that nice kind of scale that we can see from kindergarten through 8th grade, we don't necessarily get the item analysis that a teacher would have in a classroom assessment. And that's why we encourage teachers to look at this and help it inform their instructional decisions, but we do need to make sure that they balance that with other information from the classroom as well, because until we get inside the student's head and see, you know, why did you make this choice and try to get at those misconceptions, you know, we have limited value to see in that.
Okay.
But we do know that those are limitations, and it's like that with all summative assessments for the most part. The SAT is one test now that we give in April where we do actually get the items back that the students see, so the students can see what they got wrong. But that's because we give one version on one day, and there's a lot of test security around it.
Trustee Lane?
So Dr. Mead already asked about the continuation of the testing, and I guess I'd just like to put an editorial pitch into the state. I mean, one problem that we've experienced over the years, I've seen so many versions of the test, I can't even remember half the time what test is mandated by the state. It costs us extreme amounts of money and staff time. That was, and it sets back our assessments. It sets back student results. So I hope that we'll continue to use this. I always understood that was the whole point of the Common Core, so that we could have some fidelity in what we're teaching and then in testing. So I hope that those things, tests will never be aligned to teaching if we constantly change the tests. So I think we as a board, as a community, need to express to the state legislature that you choose what we teach to students, you settle on how that's going to be tested, and you don't yank us around every year changing tests, costing us millions of dollars, countless hours of staff time and frustration. So I think you'd agree with me on that, but I do want to put it out there because it's been really harmful over the years. We can't, in education, just keep flopping around on how we run things.
Yes, and it has been challenging the last few years that we've made a lot of changes to the system.
Anybody else?
Just a quick comment on, and agree with a lot of the comments that were made, and it is a valuable assessment. We want consistency, and when we brought this in, when Brian was here, superintendent, it was with the union, you know, involvement and, you know, the teachers and trying to reduce assessments. I have seen the data, though, that you're talking about, and I know Dr. Patterson, when we have the teams come in the fall, we've seen that summer learning loss data, Trustee Thorpe. I've seen it, and I've seen it consistently coming in from multiple schools when we do the fall reports for the school improvement, so something to be concerned about. Thank you.
Dr. Patterson, thank you very much for your work. Appreciate it very much.
Thank you.
Next item?
Dr. Mee, before I go to the next report, I'd like to make a quick comment too.
Oh, I'm sorry.
No, it's okay, nothing sorry about. If you know me, I speak my mind. But that last speaker that spoke to us, addressed us tonight, I don't want people to think that we're numb to parents' needs or student needs. But when a speaker says, I'll hire the lawyer, we respect the fact that they have a lawyer and we will address our questions to that lawyer. I just want the audience to know that. Thank you. Next report is RFP process. Dr. Glenn Maleko.
Mr. Rangos come up, please. Thank you. And this was part of the, Trustee Barry, you had asked for some of this information at the
Yes.
board meeting.
Thank you.
Bidding. As Dr. Malenko said last week, you had asked for an update from administration on how we do bidding and the bidding process here. So I kind of want to take a few minutes and go through 6 or 7 slides and kind of show you how we do it, give it some context, and talk a little bit about what we do or what we're trying to do to get the community more involved in how we do business here at Dearborn. So with that, I'll get going. I always like to start a discussion about bidding with this context, and that is, it's governed by an enormous amount of rules and regulations. I'm not going to go into any great detail, but in front of you, you see we have the state code, the state guidelines and code for education. We're governed by federal guidelines as well. We're currently doing that RFP for food service. That's governed by federal regulations, so we have to know about that. We also have to know about our local regulations, which the board has drafted over the course of time. So we have this enormous amount of oversight with respect to how we do bidding. So there's a lot of rules and regulations to follow. Another piece before we get into the bid process is to kind of give you an idea of the thresholds that we go through in order to determine when we have to bid. In the district, we have between $0 and $10,000. No bids, well, I shouldn't say no bids, 1 quote is required. So that gives us flexibility to get what we need in a quick fashion. Doesn't mean we don't quote those items out. From time to time we do if we have the time. But typically we're able to be very nimble when it comes to 0 to 10,000. From 10,000 to 23,881, and 23,881 is the state bid limit. That bid limit fluctuates every year. And you may, I see some nods, so you're probably aware of that. But between 10,000 or 10,001 and 23,881, we get 3 quotes, not bids, quotes. So it's an informal way of doing the bid process or the competitive bidding process. Those quotes can be either by phone, email, fax, for those of us who use fax still. You can do it in writing. But the bottom line is we do have to have them documented, so we have that for the file. And the third level is the 23,881 and above. That's when the formal competitive bidding requirements begin. And in a second, I'll talk to you about what we do here. And those are the ones that you typically see here. You don't really see anything under that amount unless there's an amendment or a modification to a contract that you have already approved. They're in the form of an RFP, request for proposal, or an IFB, invitation for bid. And I'll go into some detail on those 2 things in a second. And as obviously you are required to prove every purchase that we make over 23,881, and we bring those to you, and I think we brought several of them tonight. Before I leave that topic though, emergency purchases, I did want to kind of point out that under some circumstances when we have an emergency in the district, we can make a purchase without bidding. For example, if we had some sort of disaster in a school or something where we needed to make a decision to get something quick to get the school back on track. That doesn't mean we don't bring it back to you so that you know what we're doing, but we do have that ability. And since I've been here, I don't think we've had to do that, but I know that in the future we may have to at some point. It's inevitable. So the bidding process. There are 2 types that we follow here in the school district. One is for construction, and one is for pretty much everything else. Construction bids are required to follow the school code. Everything that we do with respect to construction bidding is laid out for us in the school code. We can't deviate from that, and we don't. A lot of our construction work bids are done by our construction management firm, Clark, our job is to make sure and to talk with them and ensure that they're doing it the way the statute would require. I'm not going to go into a lot of detail about each of the bullet points, but I'll go over a couple of them. We advertise, it's supposed to be advertised in a local paper or in the state website. We make sure that that happens. Sealed bidding is a sealed envelope. It comes in, we read them aloud. We recommend the award based on the responsible bidder, which simply means that they can do the job. In the construction area of bidding, typically bonds are required. It's usually about 1/5, but it can be more than that, and that's the bond is a surety, obviously, an insurance policy that they're going to carry out what they say they're going to carry out in the bid. The bid process for construction does not apply to anything under that 23,881, but that doesn't mean that we shouldn't do our diligence and make sure that we get the right price and a company that can do the work. And our operations group, Tim and Don and the rest of the team, they do a great job of making sure that we get quality contractors in here that can do the work efficiently and effectively. Bid process for everything else, it's governed by a different part of the school code. And what that school code basically says is two things. One is we have to have a bid process. Actually says three things that are important to this group. We have to do a bid process for everything over 23,881, and it has to be approved by the board. And the third thing is the district has to develop procedures to follow for this bid process. We have those. They've been developed over time. We're working at kind of bringing them up to speed to the 21st century, so to speak, now, but we do have good processes in place and procedures for bidding. Same thing applies here. Anything over 23,881 is a formal competitive bid is required. We may advertise in a local paper. We do, but we may put it in a local or in the state website. But the idea is to try to expose the bid to as many possible bidders as possible. So we have some flexibility, but we try very hard to make sure that there's enough competition so that we can get good bids in. We do contact as many local bidders as we can. I know, especially in the area of construction, we try very hard to get local bidders to work because they know the district, the buildings and such, probably better than anybody. Sealed bidding, a sealed envelope, just like for construction. Responsiveness and responsibility is also something that we check into. These two are required to have approval from the board at 23,881. And as I said earlier, we've given you all the different thresholds. So under 23,881, competitive, sealed, formal bidding is not required. Before I leave competitive bidding, I wanted to at least go over what cooperative bids are. And I think you probably you've probably seen many of them come through here. There are a few on the agenda tonight. The cooperative bids are bids that were done by some other government agency or some other entity that we adopt as our own. We kind of piggyback those contracts. They've already gone through the formal bidding process. Our obligation is to make sure that their bidding process is at least as is compliant with ours, is at least as stringent as ours. And we do that, and I think we've had good success. REMC, NJPA, AEPA, Wayne Risa, My Deal, that's just to name a few of them that you probably see on board agendas quite often. But they've already done the bid work for us, and by law, we don't have to do that again. That doesn't mean we won't do it, and it doesn't mean that we don't do it, but we're not required. So from time to time, we bring those to you. So one of the other questions that came up last week is what are we doing to kind of facilitate more local, more contact with the local community? I've only been here about 5 months. And so what I don't have a good feel yet for the district or for the local community, but I'm trying. I meet often with as many vendors that want to come and see me. If they call me and they want to come visit with me, I make a point of having time for them. And many of those vendors are local, and they come in and want to know how we do business. So I tell them pretty much what I've told you tonight. We're adding components to the website. We're going through some changes, I think, with the website. We're going to be adding more and more links, telling folks how to do business with us. How do we do the bid process? What statutes do we follow? Who to contact? When bids are available? Those kind of things are critical to them knowing what we're doing in the district. Personally, I'd like to seek more of a relationship with local community leaders, maybe the Chamber of Commerce. I don't know yet what's available to me, but when these organizations have opportunities for me to be with them so that we can talk about mutual things that we do, or even meet people that go to those meetings that need our or that are able to provide services to the district, I want to be a part of that. It's going to take a little time. I'm open to any suggestions, but that's one thing that I think will help us facilitate more local contracts. Networking at local engagements, you know, that's another thing. The more I can get engaged and involved in those areas, I think that I can give a little bit more leadership to the procurement function here, letting people know how we do our business and giving them the opportunity to be a part of it. That's kind of bidding how we do it in a nutshell. And if you have any questions, I'm delighted to try to answer them, and here I am.
Trustee Hamud?
Thank you. Thank you.
You're welcome.
And so my question is, looking at our website, is this something that's already on our website?
Mm-hmm.
And one, how could we make it more, you know, accessible? Do we have the procedure that you had put up there as to how we do our bids? What's the process? Is that already on the website? So
The procedure
people
itself is explained, not to the extent that I just did, but it basically tells bidders how we do business, how what we do in the process, where we advertise these, and again, you know, in a simplistic format. Phone numbers we have out there. There are some other things I want to put out there, but we're, again, in the process, I understand, of redoing our website. So those things are still going to be put out there on the website. Trying to move the link around is another piece. I think our link is buried a little too deep.
because I can't find a link on the website. That's why I'm asking, what would it be under, you know?
Go to, Tom, maybe you can help me. Business office, business services, purchasing.
Okay, I'll find it eventually.
Okay. So it's buried a little bit, so we're going to try to get that to the surface. And again, all this is predicated on when we get the new website, which I understand isn't going to be that far down the road. And if it is, we'll make accommodations to get it out there faster. But you made a great point for me, because that's something that I really want to get done sooner than later.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Trustee Hamud? Oh, Trustee Barry, excuse me.
So, thank you for the report.
You're welcome.
When I asked for that report, for a couple of reasons. One of them was I was starting to hear some static about the process that we go through, and so here's some negative things. So this was good timing. The other thing is, yeah, every time when we go out for a bond, we go ask our taxpayers for money, we also reach out to the business owners too, to support us. And what a great way to reach out to them and say, hey, we want to do business with you. We want to educate you. It's not just a phone call. Somebody reaches out to us, bring them in here. At least we're having this discussion tonight. People are watching. People will alert that, yeah, we do have a lot of contracts. I don't like it when somebody says, hey, I saw blah, blah, blah trucks delivering product, and I have, you know, I provide the same product. It's like, reach out to the business department. And we are very welcoming. This is not just a report, you know, trying to shed some, you know, positive light on us. We are very welcoming, especially to our community. I think I know I speak on behalf of everybody at this table. We want to support our community business leaders. So thank you for that report.
You're welcome.
Trustee Pellicott?
I just want to say that my suspicion is that we get the same players in our bidding processes because they're very familiar with the system, and that it's probably very difficult when you're either a smaller local business or whatever to understand the process, and it could be off-putting or intimidating or just too much trouble for them. So I guess that being said, we may need to help encourage people to explore it. I understand the process can be a little bit bureaucratic with the rules and regulations and paperwork and all that kind of stuff, and maybe a lot of people just, once they find out, decide that they don't want to, because I also have heard from the community over the years, how come you only use such and so kind of thing? Well, because there's a lot of regulations, and that eliminates some of the competition. So quite frankly, I guess we just need to be clear about the rules and regulations and how to go about the process, and that's the best we can do.
I think your point is well taken. You know, the process can be very intimidating. And again, a small business that may have the wherewithal to do the work for us may just give up when they see the work that goes into doing a proposal or a
Right.
bid. You know, again, trying to get out in the community. Now, you know, purchasing in this district is two people, myself and Kathleen Hartling. So, you know, we do everything we can to try to get the word out and get the work done. But if there's anything that goes on that I can find, I'll do a reverse trade show. I'll go and let them come to me and let me explain to them what we've got going, how we do business. You know, I've had success with that in the past, and I think I can here. It's just a matter of finding the right place to give that information.
Trustee Bowman.
Maybe it'll be a good idea to reach out to the chamber. That could be a partnership with them.
Right.
And they can provide this service for their members. I mean, this adds value to the chamber, and we're willing to help, so
And
it'd be a great partnership.
And the presentation I gave you, I would be
Yeah,
delighted to
no,
give
they have
that.
some great leaders over
Absolutely.
at the chamber, so it's
I'll-
probably a good
I'll
idea
share
to
it
reach out to
with
them.
the president of the chamber tomorrow.
Fantastic. And I look forward to talking with you.
Great conversation, thank you.
Okay.
Anything else?
Thank you.
sir.
You're welcome.